Hello everyone, welcome back to the series of video lecture on the subject English for skill enhancement. Now, today I will be talking about intensive reading and extensive reading. Before that, I am Arif Ahammed. I teach English at the Department of SNH, MLR Institute of Technology. So today's topic is intensive reading and extensive reading. This is about reading techniques, reading methodology, which is again very important because we read a lot. So when we read, we need to know about certain techniques of reading so that we can utilize our time effectively and we can save our energy and we can extract the maximum output from the act of reading. Now that's why knowing about different kinds of reading techniques are very important. You have already discussed what is skimming and scanning, two other different methodologies or types of reading, techniques of reading. Now in today's lecture, I'll be talking about intensive reading and extensive reading. So let's see the overview of the lecture. What are the aspects that I'm going to cover for today's lecture? Definition of intensive and extensive reading. So we'll get to know about what is intensive and what is extensive reading. Then we'll get to know about their purpose. Why do we need to use these kind of readings and what are the benefits of these kind of reading techniques? And then we will also have a comparison between them to enhance our understanding about these two reading techniques. Fine. So these are the three broad areas that I'm going to cover in today's lecture. So first, let's see what is intensive reading. What is intensive reading? So what is the normal meaning of the word intensive? Intensive means something very serious, right? So intensive reading in a general manner, you should remember it's a serious kind of reading, right? So let's see the definition, exact definition of intensive reading. What is intensive reading? It is a slow and careful reading. So obviously because it's serious, it would be slow and it would also be careful reading. Of a short and difficult text, normally would be dealing with serious kind of materials, not something which is not serious in nature. Okay. And with a focus on language details such as vocabulary, grammar, structure, and for deep understanding of the topic. So our purpose would be when we would be employing intensive reading, our purpose would be to understand the documents that is being read by me or read by us in detail. Their language, what kind of language is being used, what kind of vocabularies are used, what kind of grammatical structure has been used. Okay, and also what is the real meaning of the text. What is the crux of the text, like the content of the text, deeper understanding of the content. So all these things would be involved when we do intensive reading. That's why it's intensive, it's serious in nature. So what is the purpose? To analyze the language deeply. So let's say if I'm reading a news editor and I am doing an intensive reading, so what I would be doing, I would be analyzing the language, whether the language is biased or neutral. So what kind of language is being used, that I will understand, try to understand, right? To understand complex or academic text. When we read something serious academic text, it can be a scientific book, it can be a literature book, anything. When we try to seriously understand that text, what is there inside that text, what is the meaning, what is the intended meaning of the author, all those things when we try to understand, we would be doing intensive reading. And then another purpose of intensive reading is to develop accuracy in reading and comprehension. Because we focus on language, we focus on vocabulary, we focus on grammatical structure. So what happens? It develops or it helps us to enhance accuracy in reading. It helps us to become a good reader, effective reader, right? So these are the purpose of intensive reading. Now let's see the benefits of intensive reading. What are the benefits of intensive readings? Why we need to care about intensive reading? First thing, improves detailed comprehension and critical thinking. So if we are not simply memorizing something just to write in the exam, if we are reading something in order to comprehend, in order to develop our critical thinking, then obviously we have to do intensive reading. So whenever we do intensive reading, we help enhancing our comprehension level as well as our critical thinking skill. Next, it enhances understanding of grammar and sentence structure. When we pay attention minute details related to grammar and vocabulary, what happens? Sentence structure, all these things, when we pay very close attention, it helps us to develop our clear understanding about those things, the grammatical rules, sentence construction rules, sentence structures, different types of sentence, all those things we get to know. Then helps in learning new vocabulary with precise meaning, because we would be dealing with each and every vocabulary. So we get to know, our vocabulary power also get enhanced because we get to learn many new words, right? Then last one, useful for academic reading and exam preparation. If you are preparing for exam, obviously you need to do intensive reading. If you do extensive reading, what you will do, you will memorize by heart simply, right? And you will go in the exam with the hope that you will be able to write answers. But what happened? In between you forget. And then the entire answer falls flat. But if you do intensive reading, if you understand the concept in detail, if you take care of each and every minute details of the text, what will happen? You don't need to memorize it. And if you don't memorize it, if you understand it, whichever answer you are writing, you would be able to write it because you already understood the topic. You already understood the concept. So if you have the basic language skill, you should be able to write the answers without any problem. So these are the benefits of intensive reading. Hence, you should know that intensive reading is very important. Fine. Next, examples of extensive reading. Let's see intensive reading. Where do we use intensive reading? Reading a newspaper editorial to understand tone and bias. So let's say if I am reading a editorial piece in a newspaper in a very intensive manner, like if I am using intensive reading, I can do what? I can understand the tone and bias. What kind of tone is being used, whether there is any biasness in the tone. All those critical aspect I will understand. Analyzing a paragraph from a textbook for vocabulary and grammar. So when we analyze a particular paragraph from a text to enhance our vocabulary, to get acquainted with new vocabulary as well as grammatical rules and sentence constructions, everything, that time also we'll do intensive reading. Reading a scientific article or research paper carefully to understand a concept. Let's say if a research article, a scientific article is dealing with a particular concept, is discussing about a particular concept, we have to do intensive reading to understand what concept is being discussed in that particular research paper, right? Then close reading of poems or literary text. We do intensive reading while we deal with poems or literary text also, because these poems or literary text, they will have many hidden meaning inside, many symbolic meaning. So if you don't do intensive reading, most of the main part of the meaning only would be missed. That's why while reading poems or literary text, we must employ intensive reading. So these are the examples of instances where we can use intensive reading. Fine. Now I'll move to the next kind of reading technique, that is extensive reading. So you can see one was intensive, this one is extensive. Let's see what is extensive reading. Extensive reading is a kind of detailed reading only. But it involves reading large amount of material for general understanding. When you read a huge material, let's say a very thick book with 300 pages, 400 pages, okay, for general understanding, we don't try to understand each and every word. We don't observe each and every sentence structure. We don't look into the grammatical principles or rules applied in every sentences. We just read in order to develop a general understanding about that book. What is there in the book? What the author is discussing in the book? The general idea. So whenever this kind of reading is a kind of act of reading that involves large amounts of materials, and what is the purpose? For general understanding. Fine. So purpose, you can see, to develop reading fluency. So if you do extensive reading, what happens? It helps you to enhance your reading fluency. Because of your regular practice and all, your fluency would be better, will be improved. To improve vocabulary, grammar and comprehension skills naturally. So though we don't pay attention, but if we do extensive reading, very frequently, very, regularly, what will happen? Unknowingly, unconsciously, we will get to know about few new vocabulary, few particular grammatical rules and all those things to build a positive reading habit. So extensive reading, actually, reading is a good habit, right? It's a positive habit. So this act of extensive reading actually will help us to enhance, to develop or to strengthen that particular habit, because it doesn't demand a huge attention, a deep attention. So we can easily do it. And if we do it easily, what will happen? We will do it again and again. And because of that frequency, what will happen? Our positive habit would be developed. The habit of reading to drive pleasure also. When we read, let's say, a story, novel, what happens? We get pleasure also. We get enjoyment, right? So these are the purpose of extensive reading. So you can see here, intensive reading mostly were used for serious kind of purpose to understand things in a very critical manner with minute details. But when it comes to extensive reading, it's for general understanding, and we basically do this kind of reading to get pleasure. But while doing that, while deriving pleasure, we also get some other benefits, indirect benefit, right? Fluency would be would be increased, would be enhanced. Vocabulary, will get familiar with few new vocabularies and all those things, right? Now let's see the benefits of extensive reading. What is the benefit? What are the benefits of extensive reading? It increases reading speed and confidence. So when you do extensive reading again and again, what will happen? Your reading speed will improve because of the practice, and it will result in increase in confidence also. Expands vocabulary in context. So if we do extensive reading again and again, we'll get to know many new words, new vocabulary. So it will enhance our vocabulary, strength. Then it improves language intuition. So language intuition. So what happens, if you have observed, when you read a storybook or novel, you don't sit with a dictionary. You don't try to find meaning of each and every word unless it is very necessary. Normally we avoid doing that. So how do we get the meaning then? It's called intuition. Even though we don't understand a particular word in a sentence, the overall meaning of the sentence we can understand, by employing or by using our intuition. So if we do it again and again, what happens? That language intuition will improve. Our ability to understand something without understanding each and every word will improve. So that is one important benefit of extensive reading. It also encourages autonomous learning and love for reading. So because extensive reading actually is used for deriving pleasure, for entertainment, so what happens? Students, or we do it without any compulsion. Let's say reading an academic text will mostly would be out of compulsion. We would be forced to do that because we have to write exams, because we have to write assignments and all. But when it comes to extensive reading, we would be doing it out of our own choice, reading a story, reading a poem. No one would be compelling us, but we will be doing it just to get some entertainment, to derive pleasure in that, right? Now, that's why it's autonomous. So we will get to learn about many things also in an autonomous way, and it would increase our love for reading. Because we derive pleasure, we get entertainment. Obviously, it will increase our love for reading also. To get entertainment, to get pleasure, we will read more and more. So these are the benefits of extensive reading. Fine. Now examples of extensive readings. What are the examples? You can see reading storybooks, novels, magazines, newspapers. So, these kind of readings are not serious. We just read just to get the idea. What is there in the story? What is the storyline? What happened in the novel? How many characters are there? What happened with those characters? Magazines. So fashion article on some fashion thing, right? Fashion trend. So all these things we do just for entertainment in our leisure time mostly, right? Reading graded readers. So, that reader book kind of thing would be available. So written for language learners. So language learners, they actually try to learn language by reading those books, graded readers. So there also we use extensive reading. Reading blogs, travelogues, online articles, all for pleasure. So you can understand these kind of readings basically we do not for any serious purpose, not to understand each and everything in very detail, in a very deep manner, but just to get the general idea, and most importantly to get some pleasure, some happiness. I hope it's clear now, intensive and extensive reading. Now let's see the differences. What are the key differences between these two kind of reading techniques? Now these differences will again help us to understand each of these concepts in much better manner, right? So first thing, text length. So what is the difference in terms of the text that is being read? In extensive reading, mostly you would be reading long text. The text would be longer. For example, novels, storybooks and all. In intensive reading, the text won't be that much big. It would be small chapters or research articles, limited amount of material, right? The material won't be that lengthy when it comes to intensive reading. Text difficulty, what would be the difficulty level? In extensive reading, the text would be basically easy and suitable to learners level. We choose a book according to our choice. Let's say I want to read a novel. So obviously I won't be selecting a novel which is very difficult in terms of meaning as well as the language usage. If the language of that particular novel is very difficult, obviously I won't choose it to read because I would be doing it for pleasure. So I would be doing selecting something easy which is up to my level, which match my own level. On the other hand, intensive reading, the material would be challenging and complex. Though most of the time we are not interested in reading in challenging and complex things, but we have to read out of compulsion because of exams. Let's say if I'm planning to write a research paper, so I am doing literature review, I am reading many articles related to my own topic. So in all those cases, I have to do intensive reading. So they would be challenging. They won't be that much easy, and the option won't be on me to choose. I cannot choose the material in my own. I have to select everything relevant and read them irrespective of their difficulty level. Now that's why they are little challenging and complex. Then focus. What is the difference in terms of focus? Overall understanding and enjoyment. So main focus while doing extensive reading is to get an overall idea, overall understanding, not very detailed understanding or deep understanding, but general or overall understanding, and for enjoyment. On the other hand, the focus of intensive reading is language form and detailed comprehension. When we are dealing with language forms, like, when we try to learn about, small aspects of language like vocabulary, grammar rules, sentence construction, types of sentences, all those things. And when we go for detailed comprehension, when we try for detailed comprehension, then what we do? We basically do intensive reading. The focus of intensive reading is language form and detailed comprehension. Fine. Few other differences in terms of page. What should be the speed of reading? In extensive reading, it would be fast. Why fast? Because we won't stop. Let's say if I am not familiar with the meaning of a particular word, I won't stop and check dictionary, because as I said, even though I don't get the meaning of a particular word in a sentence, in a novel, what will happen? If I read the next lines and all, I will get the meaning, overall meaning. So that's why my speed also would be obviously fast. On the other hand, intensive reading would be slow and careful, because it involves detailed understanding, taking notes of each and every minute detail. That's why the reading speed would be slow and careful. Then, what is the purpose of extensive reading? Basically to enhance our reading fluency and to get pleasure. That's it. On the other hand, intensive reading, what is the purpose? It develops, the purpose of intensive reading is to develop accuracy and skill development. Why skill development? Because when we understand a topic thoroughly, we get some skill out of it. Right? Typical material. What kind of materials are being used for extensive reading? So when do we use extensive reading techniques? When we read novels, stories, blogs, magazines, all these kind of things. To read all these kind of things, we use extensive reading. On the other hand, intensive reading is being used for reading serious textbook, research articles, reports, poems, everything. Right? So I hope now it's more clear what is extensive reading, what is intensive reading. So what are the takeaway points of today's lecture? We first got to know about what is intensive and what is extensive reading, the definitions. Then also examples. What are the examples of intensive reading and extensive reading? Then we also got to know about their purposes and benefits. What are the purposes of using intensive and extensive reading, and what are their benefits? That also we got to know. Then the last thing we got to know is basic differences or comparison between them. So these differences and comparison actually would be helpful for us to get more clear idea about what is intensive and what is extensive reading. So thank you again everyone for being with me. I'll meet with you again in the next lecture with a different topic. Thank you everyone.